Welcome, one, welcome, all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens. I am Bridger, and we are here today to talk more about Star Citizen. But before we get into it, let me introduce my co host. Welcome, Gray.
Good evening, Bridger.
Unfortunately, Calathulu can't be here with us tonight, but he looks forward to talking about 3.0 with us at the next show. Right? Right? I mean,
I hope so.
according to this graph, we should have been there already, but
Nope.
for but for that little guy in the bottom. I actually learned something interesting today. That is called, and I don't know if you've heard of this, Gray, a zero bug bounce. Have you heard of
Yes.
this? Where when you get to
Heard of
zero,
this? Oh, I have been part of
oh,
these.
tell me about it. It
You
seems like it would
think
be
that
very
you're bug
exciting
free.
to finally, put the final fix in the final bug.
So this is a problem with release on software, particularly when you're talking about, an existing code base where you're adding a lot of new features. You hit this point where you're like, we have zero bugs, we've cleared out the entire backlog, we're set to go, we have your go no go meeting or you're about to, and then you click something or you do something and something else stops working. And magically, the thing that you had been working on for weeks and you thought was that really clearly defined set of problems had something else tied to it that was broken. And it bounces back up and everybody gets angry. And so goes life.
Yeah. So it has to bounce down to zero a couple of times, usually, before it's actually down to zero, as I understand
Yeah.
it.
It's
Uh,
because, as the song was going last month, you fix one bug, you might create 99 more. You
right.
just
So
never know what your fix
as soon
did
as you
if
fix
it has a
the
longer.
final
Yeah.
few bugs, you may have created more. And it's just anyway, it's.
It's particularly apt with data issues, I'd like to add. So if there's a lot of data processing going on behind the scenes, it's very possible that one of those load processes had some issues.
All right. So, anyway, before we jump into the main show, let me remind you that we record the last Sunday of every month, except that I forgot that last week was going to be the last Sunday. I thought that there was going to be a September 31st for some reason. And so I failed a
Ta-da!
little bit. Sorry about that, guys,
Yeah,
but we will
you don't know the
absolutely.
knuckle trick, Bridger? You don't know the knuckle trick?
Yeah, the September. Yeah, I
Yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah.
I'll do it
Uh-huh.
again next time. So 10 1029 is the next episode, and based on the burn down results, we've had our first go no go meeting right before October. I think we've got a very good chance to see Ivocati having 3.0 before our next show. I have not said that before. I've said plenty of times that we're hoping, but I think better than 50% chance now. I would take the over under on that, on seeing Ivocati get it before the end of October. And based on what we've seen over the last few months, I think we will absolutely see a 3.0 release before the end of the year. They've got 3 more months to get that done. Well, 2.5 because December is usually cut in half by vacations. So I think that's plenty of time. What are you? Is that your prediction as well, or do you have a different idea?
I think that fits about right. Last month, August, end of August. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Beginning of September, we might have punted that show a week or two as well. I don't remember. I think we had made a discussion about it didn't look like we necessarily were going to have a public ready build by the end of September, just by the pacing of everything. I don't think any of us expected the Evocati build to take this long to get out, but
Yeah.
so it goes. At the same time, with the way that they're talking about how the Evocati is going to be testing, I don't know if we can make an accurate prediction because the bugs that they labeled as blockers for an Evocati build are targeted. And they've talked about this on the thing. They want to target the Evocati at a very specific set of
Hmm.
issues at first.
Is it
It's
like
like
custom hardware type issues? Like
it's
because they
hard
have
to
a bigger
say. They
pool?
they clearly haven't said, um, but whatever specific issues they're expecting to run into, I think it was in one of the ATVs. They were saying that there was a very specific subset of crap
Yeah.
that they wanted to focus people on. So I would expect once those builds are really rolling, we'll probably see, a subset of them that are just to check the big issues and another subset to check terrain issues or whatever it is with the patches. And partly, the patcher is supposed to be in that.
Yes, the new patcher is
So,
part of. They've said that a couple of times in the most recent ATVs. Let me ask you this question. I believe in the past that we've seen an Evocati release within 2 weeks. We've seen an actual release to the public after the Evocati. Do you expect
yes,
that same timeline to hold for this big, super important patch?
hard to say.
I think it would
There's a
have to be a little bit bigger.
there's a
There's
part of me
so
that
much
wants to
more
say,
added, right?
yeah, there's a part of me that wants to say you're right, that they're going to have to go really heavy and make sure that in that couple of weeks there's a ton of builds. They're making sure people have a day turnaround to report bugs or whatever it is, and then get this public because that way there's less chance of leaks. Um, Hypothetically, less chance of leaks. But when you start looking at the reality, you know, it might take longer. It might be like, oh, there's 3 or 4 weeks of dedicated bug fixing
Mm,
required. Or it might be a situation where if the diff patcher is working well, maybe all they need to do is get some of the major networking and instancing bugs figured out, some of the biggest crashes, and then tell people, hey, listen, we're going to start up the PTU, not the private one, the public one.
ah, right. Yes.
And at that point, you can say, okay, this is going to be rougher. And if you want to test this, you're going to have to do the full download because now they support multiple versions on
Hmm.
the patcher. But we can guarantee you quick iterations.
Right. And that would be great because you won't get any news sites saying 3.0 Star Citizen released and it's a buggy mess kind of thing. If you're saying we're releasing it to
Yeah.
the public test universe, but you don't make a big fanfare out of it, you just kind of make a single post on the website, you talk about it on ATV, you put a link in people's, to download the new patcher inside people's profiles on the site, then that's it. That's all you need. People are paying attention to these.
Yeah.
They're gonna go on their own accord. You don't have to issue a press release for the public test universe.
And I would say if in one working week you can manage to hammer out the majority of the non-blocker bugs that they want targeted.
Hmm.
Because the blockers, they're not even going to let us touch it till the blockers are done.
Right.
But if in about a week they could hammer out most of the non-blocker issues and keep the avocado hordes interested, it's very possible that the only things that might leak would be patch notes.
Yeah.
And at that point, there would be no real surprises to anybody because the patch notes aren't going to be earth shattering.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest pieces of this patch for our friends that have very limited bandwidth for their internet on a monthly basis. I know a lot of ISPs in Australia and Canada, especially, will do this where you only get 100 gigs a month or something like that. And if you have to re download Star Citizen twice,
Yeah.
then yeah, that's a big problem. So the new patcher, as you said, is a diff patcher. So it's only going to check what's different between what's on your hard drive and what's on the server and simply download the files that need to be downloaded. You won't have to re-download everything again, ever again. They said this will be the last time you download Star Citizen in its entirety, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
But it'll be nice, at least for a few patch cycles, to have this work.
So, that having been said, don't forget you can send us feedback at talesofshow.com. If you have any questions that you'd like to get answered on the show or you want to give us feedback, we do occasionally reveal some of the feedback that we get and respond to it right here on the show. So, let's jump into the kind of things that we have heard so far over the last month or so. One of the most interesting pieces on Around the Verse that we saw was the stamina and actor status system. This one is a lot more complex than I originally gave it credit for. Let me ask you this, Gray. If you're building a stamina system in your average FPS, your Call of Duties, your Battlefields, where you can only run so far or jump so much, it seems like you just basically say, we're going to create a variable. It goes 1 to 100. When you sprint, it drains at a predetermined rate. When you're not sprinting, it recovers at a predetermined rate. Jumping chunks it down by X. We're done. Game over. We don't have to worry about anything else because we're done. And it's like, okay, now we're going to take that and we're going to work on that system for another year and see what we can do.
Okay, well, let's also keep this in mind. When you're talking about like the run system, let's look at PlanetSide 2, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a great example of the really simplistic end of it. PlanetSide 2, you don't even have a bar.
No,
You can just run forever.
correct.
But while you're running, your spread opens up.
Hmm.
So the area where your gun will fire gets really, really big. When you start talking about Call of Duty, you take that and you add a stamina bar, I think, right?
Yeah, I know
Or is it
they've
Battlefield
got
that
one
adds
in
a stamina bar?
Battlefield. Yeah, I haven't played Call of Duty in forever, so I couldn't tell you what it's like
I
today.
haven't either. I know Call of Duty doesn't do directional weapon pointing. It really is just center your screen still. And so the bloom gets bigger as you sprint more and that kind of thing. And then yeah, Battlefield, same sort of deal. You've got the bloom, and you have what do you call it? You have the stamina bar, and while you're sprinting, your stamina bar drains and your bloom gets big. I think what they're trying to do in this is just take it the one step further than that and say, well, we are making it so where you point the gun nose, that's where you're going to be, firing and all that. And when you have a sniper rifle out or you're looking down scope, the accuracy is going to be, moving up and down,
Hmm.
and it all fits really nicely with a slightly more complex model. Um, I think that we're I think that we're seeing a complex setup for it, but in practice, it won't really be that complex to
Oh
deal with.
no, it'll be. I mean, everything in it makes sense intuitively. It's just that you wouldn't expect them. Like, for example, they tied the regeneration of your stamina to your breath. So when you're breathing, every inhale regenerates some stamina. Or I don't know exactly how they do that. If you're breathing heavily, do you regenerate stamina faster? I don't remember if they mentioned anything like that. But they pointed out that, okay,
I think they said sitting down or stopping dead, your stamina regens faster.
right. So,
Walking, it still regens.
but it still depends upon breathing oxygen in. If the oxygen you're breathing is limited, like you only have so much in your ship and you're running out because your oxygen, your life support systems are down or what have you, then your
Yeah,
stamina regenerates slower and slower. If your suit is running out of oxygen and you're running around, Grimhex or whatever and fighting there, and then the station loses power and the outside, so you're on your suit oxygen and it's lowering, then your stamina regenerates slower. So it ties that into the oxygen system. Of course, when there's no oxygen, you regenerate no stamina and eventually die. So that's important to keep in mind. And not only that, but as you mentioned, the breathing and the stamina affects what you do. I have to imagine that firing an automatic rifle must take some stamina as well.
I don't think it'll take stamina so much as what they've mentioned is when you're firing, there's recoil.
Sure.
So we've seen that already. It starts going up. So you have to be actively aiming down unless you're holding down one of the steadying keys. Because they were doing the thing where like hold breath
Mm-hmm.
on sniper rifles and
Sure.
that kind of thing. I'll bet they'll let you do that looking down scope on an assault rifle.
Yeah, and
And that drains your stamina.
right, because more correct, more precisely, it prevents your stamina from regenerating, and by default, your stamina has a reduction over time. If it's not regenerating, your stamina will just go down because it's just you need to recover your stamina because your body's constantly just working all the
I'm
time.
calling it right now. There are going to be some hilarious bugs with people just standing still and keeling over dead. This
Yes,
is going to
I'm
happen.
sure. Because for some reason
Or
the
is
game
already
determines that
happening.
they're
Who
not
knows?
regenerating stamina or something to that effect. So here's a question for you. There was a point in one of the videos where they mentioned they were trying to come up with creative ways to make the characters want to take their helmets off, because if you're just in your spacesuit with your helmet on all the time, then you don't get any of those moments like, oh crap, the system just
Canopy is
got,
going to breach.
yeah, the breach in the doors been exploded and now we're losing oxygen, and everybody's just like, so what, we're all in spacesuits all the time. You lose all that drama. I mean, is that going to be effective? What are they going to do to make you want to take your helmet off in
Oh, that's a good
space?
question. I mean, they've already stated that there are flight suits in the game.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a flight suit, but they want you to take the helmet of the flight suit off, then it can't be really tied to the suit necessarily unless it's fitting into the chair. And flight suits will obviously fit in the chair.
Mm.
So the helmet itself, that does bring some interesting questions. One of them, obviously, will your flight suit just not have an oxygen compressor?
So you're saying you would need to have some form of like the body armor in order to
Have a
have the.
compressor built in? Like, will any suit that has a compressor that lets you pull Atmo from your cockpit into your suit by default?
Oh, okay. You're saying if you're in like a single seat fighter, you're just going to have a hose tucked into your suit. And when you pull that off, you've got a very limited supply versus if you're in some kind of light armor with a tank attached to it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
See, that's sort of what I'm wondering here is like, if you're in a constellation, will there not be that tube? Will that be a fighter kind of thing?
Hmm. That's an interesting
So,
example.
like, will a fighter cockpit hook you into an oxygen system? And therefore, if you eject, you have X amount of oxygen until you're dead. Because you're not carrying a giant oxygen tank on your back.
Yeah, but I
Just
mean,
not a thing.
every time you want to like go on an EVA, you always have oxygen in the game right now. It is in 2.6. I
You
just
do.
can't imagine them taking that away from you and saying, no, you can't go on an
So,
EVA unless you change from your flight suit into a special EVA suit. I don't know.
so hear me out. Maybe that's part of the gameplay they're trying to encourage.
Hmm.
Maybe they don't want you to go out to a beacon in a Hornet.
Yeah, no, you could be right.
And if you go out there in a Hornet and you step out of your cockpit and you have your air, you might only have 5 or 10 minutes of air independent of your ship. It could be a relatively small amount. So you'd be racing the clock.
Ashton in the chat said, you can't eat with a helmet on. So maybe if your character's starving to death, you have to either risk dying from oxygen deprivation or eating. Now there's some
Nice.
drama for you right there.
Yeah.
No.
And
Um,
what I'm wondering is, very possibly, will it be a situation where if you're in your cockpit, you're in your fighter, and as it's been stated, it'll affect your G forces and everything with your stamina and everything else. Maybe in your fighter, you will always have a helmet on.
Yeah, I think the smoothest way to do this is yeah, a flight suit should have a very limited reserve oxygen, like an emergency reserve. It's not
Yeah,
designed for you to get out and use that while you're exploring. That would be something that you would have to like take get out of your chair and go to like a little locker or something on your ship, whatever kind of
yeah,
ship it is, and put on an actual oxygen tank onto your back, like a camelback type
well,
thing, and plug it
well, like
into
we've
your suit.
seen, we've seen the explorer suits,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine the difference between a flight suit and an explorer suit will largely be oxygen reserves, and obviously some like radiation shielding or whatever. But yeah, that sort of idea.
So I would like for to see that limited reserve be about 5 minutes. Like you could get out of your Hornet or whatever and or your 300i and go over to a wreck and like grab some easy to find loot. But if you wanted to actually like salvage some stuff and stay out there for a period to get some to like burn your way into a hold and get to some really valuable loot or something, you would
You
need
need
a
to swap
moored. You
suits.
need to swap suits, and that's one way you could differentiate and say, listen, the single seat ships as a general rule aren't going to have locker space for extra suits. They're going to have your reserve oxygen, and that's it. They're not designed for that. So you'd have to take something like a Freelancer or a
Cutlass.
Caterpillar. A Cutlass would work too. That would make the Cutlass a lot more interesting. You're right. That would differentiate it
And
pretty significantly.
any ship where you would have crew compartments of some sort would have lockers.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you have a locker, you can put suits in the locker, plain and simple. If you have 4 crew members, you probably have about 4 locker spaces worth of suits. Lo and behold.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, actually, this does let you say, your ship, how much oxygen is in the ship.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I don't think they've
So,
resolved what kind of technology we're dealing with in this future, right? Because
so hear me out on that one. One of the things that's interesting about the ship. Let's look at Elite Dangerous real quick. Elite, you have unlimited oxygen and unlimited breathable air as long as your power generator is going. I think that
Hmm.
sort of follows with the whole like submarine idea. If you got a sub, you pull in water, you end up with everything else. So if you
Hmm.
have enough fuel, you have enough hydrogen in your ship. I'm going to guess that they're going to have space magic allow you to turn that hydrogen
Hand
into
wavium.
hand wavium air.
Yeah.
So that would mean that as long as your ship it has enough fuel, you're in good shape. But when you run out of fuel,
Hmm.
all of a sudden it's not just a matter of you're sitting dead in the water or anything else. You start running out of life support.
Right. And they did mention like carbon scrubbers are a thing too. They might not be
Yep,
consumable the way they were on like the Apollo missions, but you are going to need to get the toxic carbon dioxide out of your atmosphere just as you're going to
takes
need to
power.
get, and that takes power. Exactly. So it's probably just going to be a general life support. Like, I don't know why you would differentiate those. Like, hey, the oxygen injecting version, or like, I have a tank with oxygen here, but the life support's down, and I'm still dying from carbon dioxide poisoning. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you can start looking at the details of like a constellation. Now we have Techie and Twitch chat saying, face over IP is a waste of time and money. I won't be taking my helmet off. I would expect that if you were in a constellation or you were in a bigger ship like an Idris, and you're doing anything along the lines of sitting down in a chair at a pilot, they will force you to take your helmet off. It will be a feature that they
Yeah.
absolutely enforce.
I can't think of like a good in fiction reason to make that choice, but I can agree with the desire to make things more dramatic in a sense.
I think that
Um,
they just won't allow oxygen hookups and they won't allow your suit to have an independent power source if you are in any sort of a piloting seat. And
I
that's going to
mean,
be basically the limiting factor.
yeah, but if you're in space and the only thing separating you from death is this tiny little glass, you're going to want a backup plan in case that canopy is breached, right? I mean,
Uh,
everybody
there,
should have a full spacesuit when they're piloting a fighter expecting to go into
so
combat.
that's a fighter.
Right.
I think the fighters, they're going to let you hook right in. They'll let you jack into the
Which
oxygen,
means you
you'll be
need, right,
fine.
but which means you need a helmet. But what are you talking about?
I'm talking about a constellation or
So,
a
oh,
Idris or something like
okay.
that.
So rather, okay.
Anything with a stand-up cockpit, I would say you are very
Hmm.
likely to be required to wear a flight suit. Even the Vanguard, I'm kind of thinking the Vanguard might end up being a you have to run to the back and get in your locker.
Huh.
I mean, it will. Okay, so the big
I
thing is
mean,
this will mean they have to increase durability on big ships. So,
or just have like a system that if the front canopy of like the constellation is breached, you get like emergency metal shafts that like close in front of it to like armor basically to prevent the atmosphere from leaking. But now you can't see where you're going.
or
You got
you
to
could
rely
start
on your
talking,
instruments.
or you could start talking about like emergency air shields. We already have those for like the Bengal carrier and the Idris when they
Oh
open
yeah,
their
yeah,
doors.
yeah.
It's very possible that you could do them, but the energy consumption is
Detrimental in a
bonkers.
military conflict. Yeah, that could totally be a thing. That would mean you don't
So,
have to wear your but then you're just like flying through
yeah,
space with your front
but you
open.
blow out the window of an Idris. There's two questions. One is maybe they just make it take a long time for the oxygen to drain.
Yeah. I mean,
They might make it so even if you destroy the window, it just looks like there's a few holes in it.
yeah.
The other thing is that they might say, okay, well, yes, it is instant, and the air just explosively decompresses until this emergency shield pops up.
Right.
But that emergency shield disables all your weapons, or
Or just sucks so much power that your weapons can't fire as fast, et cetera, et cetera.
well, which goes back to like if you're in one of those ships. In fact, if you're really in any ship where this could be a problem, maybe the Vanguard's a bad example. Maybe you have to go to the Connie or bigger or the Freelancer. If you're in one of these ships and your cockpit gets blown out, you might really need to, have your co-pilot change the power priorities. The
Yeah, and
moment that you can get your helmets on, they change their power priorities back out, and your oxygen drains back down again.
I mean
Because if
the
it's going to be 5 to 10 minutes in a suit, right? Let's make that
yeah.
assumption. I can't imagine if your whole window gets blown out that you'll be able to get back to safety in 5 to 10 minutes, which means there's going to have to be some way to patch it, or there's going to have to be an artificial way to say, I'm going to limp back home without an air seal made of diamond glass.
So if I'm thinking like in real life, this is the future 29, 45 or whatever, 47 we're on now, and if this is the real future, the reason people don't wear helmets in like an Idris or a larger, like a Bengal carrier, is because it's uncomfortable and you don't have to. The ship has gajillions of pounds of armor protecting you from space. It's the same reason you don't wear any kind of suit in a submarine, because you're not expecting the hull to breach. Even in a military type thing, if the hull breaches, you're dead anyway. So the suit isn't really going to help you.
Also, to be totally fair, if you're walking around a submarine, you wouldn't wear a full bathysphere suit, partially because you wouldn't be able to have oxygen passively pumped into the suit from the outside. True. Unless you had full compressors built in, at which point you're not sitting down or really doing anything.
But that's my point, though. How do you mechanically represent, this is uncomfortable and awkward to walk around in, I don't want to do this? I don't know. I don't know how you mechanically represent that, other than just to say, hey, player, when you're in here, if you want to manipulate these stations, you can't be wearing that big, bulky, helmet suit. I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get stuck on this topic for too long. We've been kind of reiterating
it is a good one,
and hypothesizing. Yes, it is a good one. Now, one of the things that I noticed in this stamina and actor system status system, and everybody else seemed to notice too, is that the guy runs up like one flight of stairs and he's breathing like he just got finished with a marathon or a sprint. He's just like, his heart rate's at like 180. I'm like, dude, that was a flight of stairs. What is going on? And, they're tweaking things. And somebody else pointed out that probably, it might have been a heavy suit, but they're probably pretty significantly speeding up and slowing down how fast you gain and recover from this, just to test it quicker. Because if you had a realistic time where you had to sprint for a good 60 seconds before you started getting really winded, then you would take a long time to test everything. So that probably is the situation where it is. But that was my concern anyway, because I have played plenty of games with those stamina things. Like, just as an example, like when you first start out in the new Zelda game on the Switch, your character can run for almost 10 seconds before he gets winded. Like, in my most out of shape period, I could still run for more than 10 seconds without breathing heavily. So it felt really weird. And there are plenty of other games that have you as a big, tough military guy, but in order to balance the mechanic, they had to make it last about 10 seconds. Otherwise, what was the point to limiting it? Because you're in this tiny map of a tiny, like, 2 city blocks. Well, you don't have to run very far, so the stamina system has to be a lot more limited. So it's going to be hard to balance that.
I mean, not even necessarily saying you don't have to run very far. You don't have to run for very long, because your average engagement on, like, Call of Duty or Battlefield, your character is not going to live that long.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that in Star Citizen the idea is still they want people to try to live for longer periods of time. So if you assume that you're not going to sprint for 3 seconds, get shot in the head, and that's the end of your engagement, and you're really looking at people who are going to have 5 to 10 minutes before they would have to disengage, you can make sprinting for 30 full seconds, an actually meaningful thing.
Yeah, actually, sprinting for 30 seconds in like medium or heavy armor, I could definitely see that taking the wind out of people, even people that are fit. I was reading in that thread,
but like 2 seconds,
Yeah, I was reading in that thread somebody that's like, I go on 3-mile runs with my full pack. Somebody obviously in the military somewhere. And I'm only lightly winded at the end of it. I'm like, you motherfucker. Like, I have been running all summer, and I can't run for 5 kilometers / 3 miles without getting winded at every point. I'm winded the whole time. You bastard. All right. Anyway, So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see, and of course, I'm doing it without carrying, 50, 60, 70 pounds of equipment and armor. So there's that too to be to consider. Um, so anyway, there's going to be plenty of feedback on this system to get it to feel both realistic and also have a good impact on the actual gameplay itself. As we
Yeah.
mentioned, if there's too much, there's no point in even having a limit, and if there's not enough, it's going to feel really weird. So on to the mission system. The mission system, I didn't find so many quite interesting things to talk about. It talks a lot about how they're going to create the procedural missions in the 3.0 build, which is basically the procedural mission system in its infancy. This is the first version of it that we're gonna be playing around with. All the older missions that we've been playing with are all scripted missions, and they basically, instead of just adding on procedural stuff, they threw out all the scripted ones from the previous one and rebuilt them as the new procedural subsumption mission systems. And you know what? Subsumption, they say that word a lot. Gray, can you give us a quick rundown? What does that actually mean for them?
Decision making. Long and short of it is decision making. So normal missions, it's very linear. Even when you start looking at things where it chains together, you know exactly how those chains are going to work. Bridger slowly moves the camera. Even when you're trying to figure out how to chain your missions together, you're trying to do it the very logical, clean, one-to-one way. Subsumption, the idea is that NPCs will make decisions based on the environment and conditions. So in the case of procedural generation, what you'd be saying in those is, okay, well, if we are on a rescue mission, let's say that a couple of rescue missions have been done in a certain asteroid patch, Subsumption might tell us that there are no more missions to be had in that asteroid patch. So let's not ask people to go there. Let's have a whole different set of priorities that AI can look at. So the AI would say, well, this area is now low priority because a bunch of missions have been done there. And then it would send us to a different station or a different asteroid patch. Let's say it's, what's her bucket? ICC listening post. You could potentially say, well, if the server has been spamming missions that send us to that first asteroid belt, maybe we should stop doing that. And Subsumption would tell you prioritize the next set of things in the stack that you have here, and start sending people there instead.
And it's kind of as I think the best way to think of it is compared to a scripting system, which for all intents and purposes is basically a flowchart. If you imagine
Yeah.
the decision tree of an AI or as a mission giver as a flowchart, if person has completed mission A, then offer missions B and C. If they take mission B, then spawn Pirate X in system Y, and then if Pirate X in system Y dead, then offer mission reward, right? That's exactly what it's just this tree of things all coming
Yeah.
down this chain, whereas subsumption makes those decisions of dynamically offering new missions to players based on other events going on in the world so that it's more
Yeah.
dynamic. And as you were saying, it can be dependent upon if there are a lot of players or in an area, or if a lot of missions have been spawned in a given area,
Uh,
or if there's combat in an area, or if there are prices that are too high or too low in a given area. It can tie into the economic system to give missions.
you could go so far as to say, if there was a mission in Grimhex to go blow up a transport ship, if someone completes that Grimhex mission, that transport ship wouldn't arrive at its destination. And when the NPC notices that something didn't arrive at a certain time, Subsumption would tell it, you can now add this mission to your set of
Like a
decisions.
search and rescue mission for that transport.
Exactly.
Somebody else
So
gets that and finds it, and that adds to the immersion of the area as well.
exactly. And when you start talking about the sim of the entire universe, yes, this does mean that you'll have a lot of missions that only one person gets to go to or only one party gets to go to.
That's what I
Um,
want. That's what
I
I
know.
want.
And it means that in situations where these are spawning, you might have the go gather 10 Space Wolf pelt missions all the time in certain
Mm-hmm.
areas. which is probably going to be things like cargo.
Let's be real.
Fly,
They're space
yeah,
rats, right?
space rats. Yeah, go go fly your transport state to this station that produces space rat pelts and pick up 10 tons of them and bring them back to this station that wants space
10
rat pelts.
tons? What are you walking around in a Hull C?
10 tons. Come on, come on. Space rat pelts are heavy. That's like 4 of them.
Oh, okay.
So when you start looking at these sorts of missions, yeah, they're going to be the same boilerplate. But when you look at the whole living universe, they could have an NPC that says, okay, when economic conditions are correct, send a transport ship from point A to point B, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if that transport ship gets intercepted, which another NPC or somebody else could have that happen, whether it's a player or a mission or anything else, that could then spawn the search and rescue and everything else. So it does give you the ability to have a much more living universe by sticking to the subsumption concept early.
Yep. I can definitely see the advantages of this dynamic mission concept. And of course, the examples that they've given in the past have been sort of the competing missions where somebody's looking for a mission and they grant them a mission that says, go here and, try to defend this place from pirates or whatever. And then another person could accept. Once that mission is accepted, another mission becomes available to other people, which is go steal this thing from this place that's guarded by some guardian guys, whatever.
And we do have to look at the law of unintended consequences here, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There's a distinct possibility that missions could be like, oh, go defend this place from pirates, but the pirates were given that mission 35 minutes ago. The NPC would have no way to know that the pirate people are already there. So the only way that they could really do it is say, well, this is getting higher and higher risk as time goes on. It's been 30 minutes since this last mission was created at this pirate base. It's very possible that someone has already accepted this. So the pirate attack is already ongoing. They're going to have to account for that because you could pick up the mission and immediately have it fail in a lot of cases. So you need to be aware of that, and the system needs to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you accept the defend the base from pirates mission, and 2 minutes later the pirates have blown the base up before you can even leave, the NPCs need to have levels of, I'm not going to take this personally, rather than just
I think that's
you
just got to reverse
penalty.
those. You don't spawn the pirate mission until after you spawn somebody accepts the defending mission. But
maybe so. But if the mission is defend the transport from pirates, but the pirate or the transport has already dynamically been spawned, this is where the thing can get dicey.
And you have to be.
Yeah.
I like the idea of so many of those examples of that kind of mission, like, oh, hey, we got a distress call, or there are rumors of pirates in this area. Can you go defend this transport we sent through, or whatever? And the thing, like, you could literally just not go there for 3 days, and then when you go there, it triggers the spawn of everything flies into place. I like the idea of, hey, the clock's ticking. If you don't get over there and do something about it, it's not going to give you a literal clock on your HUD, like a countdown, like you must escape before the whole place collapses on you. No, but it's not going to give you any indication, except that in the mission text, it'll be like, hey, you need to get over there before the bad thing happens. And then it's up to you to decide, do I move my ass or not? And if you don't, and if your ship's too slow or you're too far away, then you're going to get another message saying, we've detected the transport that you were sent to defend has been destroyed and looted and salvaged before you could get there. So good job on that one.
And I've heard complaints, particularly about, I'm going to harp on it again, Elite Dangerous missions, that they're not real life friendly because you're only given 24 hours to complete these missions. And I'm thinking to myself, 24 hours? That's just generous.
Yeah.
Like, if you accept a dynamic mission, you should be accepting you're going to do it now. You should be checking your watch and saying, do I have half an hour to handle this defense issue or to go escort this thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing. You don't start a league game if you have to leave for work in 20 minutes. No.
And that's how people need to treat these.
Yeah.
It needs to be okay, this is a meaningful thing to accept this mission, not this is a boilerplate space rat mission.
I mean, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing in most other MMOs, like if you're going into a dungeon, you're committing to a particular amount of time in World of
Exactly.
Warcraft or what have you. But in those cases, it's a social contract that holds you up. In this one, it's your own reward.
Contract.
Yeah, it's your actual contract. I mean, there is one other thing that I forgot to mention with regards to Subsumption. They also made a big point about the fact that it's all hierarchical. And once you build a block of a particular type of mission, somebody else could grab that block whole and just put it into another mission and use all the stuff that you've done. So it makes building new twists on existing missions much faster and more fluid than building everything from scratch, which is what they were doing before. So that's the other big advantage of Subsumption, is it lets them more easily mix and match with pieces that they've already built so that they can build new things faster, which I'm very happy about, of course.
It'll be interesting to see how they terminate those logic chains, or if they do in some cases. Will there be suggestions? Will there be situations where effectively you have an end game for that NPC?
Yeah.
Where I'm just asking this just to thin air. Where are we looking at situations where an NPC will say, "Wow, you failed literally everything. This whole thing has gone to hell. We haven't shipped anything in 3 days. This is bad."
I'm using my last 50,000 credits to put a bounty on your head, you asshole.
Will there eventually be a point where the NPCs are just like, "I'm taking a break. Like, this area is in lockdown for a day or two while we handle these other things," and they just wait for other missions to complete before those start spawning again? It leads to some interesting questions about, with the universe being so large and with so many things, they're going to definitely have to make it so there is potential to, how do I put this, to send players somewhere else. Eventually, it's going to have to be a situation where the NPC is like, "You defended my transport. I'm good for the next month. I made my salary. You have a nice day."
Right. You can't just keep going back to the same person over and over again for new, missions to, cover the same transports. And obviously that doesn't feel realistic. And they're going for, that they're going to have, okay, this company has 16 registered transports. And so there's only that many missions that are going to go out. And they each have a name that you might recognize if you see them out and about. So that's certainly a potential as well.
And where Eckert doesn't have any wrecks for you to go salvage.
Yeah. You gotta wait until
there could be a situation where, you have to wait for Subsumption to bring something into the system to make it interesting.
You gotta wait for somebody to get pirated.
But it'll also put a real premium both on high population systems, because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. So Crusader, Terra.
Yeah, I was gonna say Terra.
Areas
Croshaw.
around Seoul. All of these areas that are busy and have busy hubs around them are likely going to get swarmed. But it means that the outlying areas, that's where it's really going to get interesting.
Yeah.
Because occasionally you're going to have these chains spawn, and occasionally you're going to get people who are told, "Would you be willing to go out to Vandal Space and do this for me? Because we're missing someone."
So
it'll be meaningful to find these sorts of missions, I would imagine, when you start getting further away from, Happy Land.
And this is still, like I said, the very first, infancy of this new mission system. And it's really going to come into its own when we get the economy portion of the game fully fleshed out. I mean, we saw that economy design document. What's it, like 3 years ago now at this point, for all intents and purposes?
When they were board gaming?
Yeah, when they were building that board game. So anyway, once that gets more fully fleshed, and we're going to have a very, very basic economy in 3.0, but once we get a more fleshed out economy like they were originally designing, that will really that's when this mission system comes into its own, I think. That and the, once you tag on the exploration element, because I could definitely see a problem if you're spawning wrecks or like new jump points to brand new systems that you want players to be able to find, but you don't want to tell players, "Psst, hey, this patch added a new jump point, go look for it," because that's not immersive.
Yeah.
If instead you're just browsing your regular mission thing and you see, hey, rumors of a new jump point near such and such. There's a mission to go look for it. It's not going to tell you. It's not going to with a big arrow pointing right where it goes. That would be like crappy, right?
And
but
even then,
just getting people in the right direction.
Even then, you're probably not going to be told rumors of a new jump point. There's probably going to be a number of explorers guilds and traders.
And if you have a high enough reputation with them, maybe you get selected personally.
Well, and they probably are going to have boards of like anomalies. Things that they're like, hey, what is this? We've got these sensor anomalies coming through. And this will give explorers content.
I mean, you could even have something like the Nesso Triangle in the lore was the place where ships kept disappearing in the Sol system, and they couldn't figure out why until somebody figured out that it was actually a jump point. And that could be how many new jump points are found.
It could just as easily be pirates.
Yeah, exactly. And you won't know until you go and explore it.
Yep. And all of a sudden you find a whole bunch of whatever they're called with their cutlasses. What are those guys called in Crusader right now?
Oh, the pirate faction?
Yeah, they got some gang name. That's eluding me.
I don't know.
Regardless, it might just be some new gang that crops up. And that gang could crop up due to subsumption.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to see.
Oh, we confused Spud. No, it wasn't a tabletop game. It was like an economy tabletop game that they were building to try and test the concepts that they were putting together in terms of how the economy would work.
To be fair, some of the guys in Austin who were involved with that did end up making a tabletop game. It isn't Star Citizen, but it is a space trucker type game that was on Kickstarter.
I think
I'll try to dig that link up for the after show here, but I don't have it on hand.
All right. So anyway, that's the mission system. The only really interesting thing I thought that was in the air traffic control ATV was the concept that the person or NPC that's doing the air traffic control is going to be represented by an actual physical avatar in the game that, like, if you go into the station, you'll see him, like, behind glass somewhere actually interacting with people and, you know, giving them clearance to land on pad 5 or whatever. And so you'll see it in real time synced up while other people are entering the station. And that is just another level of immersion that's really cool. Not only that, you can come up to a system and please hold for the next available representative. and
there's going to have to be more than one. If you're in this system, it's going to have to be like, oh, okay, NPCs 1 to 4 are taken. Is NPC 5?
Well, for a really big, if you're landing in like ArcCorp, you're definitely going to need multiple of those situations. But if you're just landing on like a station, like a mining station or something with only 6 or 7 platforms, you don't need more than one guy.
And it also does introduce some opportunities for 2 things. One of them is random number generator, who you're talking to.
Yeah. Because
it's possible that 3 other people came in, so you're talking to number 4. Maybe number 4 has a subsumption mission.
Hey, I see you're in a 325A. I actually know a guy who needs a good blasting. If you're up for it.
I mean, it could be something as simple as you're coming in, if you happen to get this one air traffic controller, they have a subsumption AI that says that they're disturbed about crime in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And if you happen to get that controller, you might have the opportunity to take a mission. I mean, there's some RNG to it, but it also means that the universe, again, will feel very alive compared to just every time you talk to an air traffic controller, you get a mission.
Yeah, and that's actually, man, actually, if they did that and they're like really good missions, you'd have people like taking off and landing over and over again to get the mission. You don't want that.
But you'd have to trigger it first.
Yeah.
You'd have to have somebody triggering the crime state first.
And hopefully,
interesting questions.
Hopefully, like, all of these background things don't become super apparent in terms of, like, oh, that mission triggers when X happens, because that breaks the immersion, obviously. You want it to be complex enough that it's not super easy to just figure that stuff out. But anyway, the next one up was usables. And the only thing I could think when watching this was just to quote our glorious leader, nobody knew sitting on a chair could be so complicated.
And object-oriented programming.
I mean, it
because
really
nothing
is.
is simple when you couple it together.
I mean, they showed a ton of B-roll during this ATV of like all the different ways people could approach and then sit on a chair and then like leave the chair and then lean on it and then like back leaning on the table. And it's like, okay, Mess Hall Simulator 2017 is almost ready. Like, here's just a quick example if you guys haven't seen the episode. They've got like 3 or 4 different ways to sit in every assigned seat spot, and they didn't want it to all look like people are sitting in a slot, so they then had to a potential situation where they could shift to the left or the right a little bit, and then when you're sitting at a table, that character then has to know that it can interact with the things on the table, and all of this is hierarchical, so the seat tells the AI what's on the table for them to interact with.
And keep in mind, the seat doesn't have to be a literal seat either. Walking up to the side of the table has to have the same level of interactive.
Yeah, or could be a bar that you're walking up to. There could be like a slot for the AI character to walk up to on the bar in order to lean on it or to just pound their hand on it and ask for a drink or what have you.
But keep in mind, you're also talking about a bar. So it's not just as simple as what we just saw, where it's one table with 2 chairs and walking up to the side or anything else. It's rows and rows and rows of individual chairs all up against the bar with items attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just figuring out how to make one seat work. It's figuring out how to make the NPC comprehend and deal with the fact that there could be 24 seats in a row or 24 seat objects in a row that they need to know how to subsequently use or ignore on their way to wherever they're happening to go, or if that's going to become their new destination because of what's sitting on the table.
Yeah. So it's definitely a really interesting situation that they're building this super complex system to allow for these very complicated interactions, which we take for granted every day. Like, oh, what do you mean? I just go and sit down at a table and like rest my arms on it. But it's like, yeah, but you don't realize how subtly differently you do that from other people versus, somebody pulling out the chair and sitting on it backwards, or somebody sitting on it from the right or from the left, or putting their foot up on their knee or what have you. There's just so many different ways.
And being Will Riker and going right over the back.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't incorporate like a dozen different ways to sit in that chair, then it's going to look super rote. It's going to look very robotic when all of the AIs are all sitting in the chairs, or even if they're players, they're all sitting in the chairs and they get on the chair exactly the same every time, and then they get off the chair exactly the same every time. So, I mean, that is all very complicated, and it's very cool that we have it, and I hope they don't have too many nightmares about mess halls while they're programming this.
There is a programmer who will spend the next 10 years trying to figure out how to put how awesomely they built chairs on their resume.
Right. That's true. They could say, listen, I built some amazing chairs. You don't even know how complex...
eCarpenters.com.
eCarpenters. Don't go there, people. We don't know what's there. That might be something
no
you don't want to click
don't
on.
Click that. Yeah. So,
anyway, the only other big news that I think we haven't talked about yet is the Origin X1 bike.
Yes.
We're calling them bikes, right? Despite the fact that they don't have 2 wheels.
It's a space
bicycle is where you get 2
hover
wheels. Hover bike, I guess hover bike. It's the accepted terminology in sci-fi. So, so hover bikes, including previously the Nox and the Dragonfly, which both of those are by AOPA, right?
No, Dragonfly's Drake.
Oh, Drake is Dragonfly. I'm sorry. Yes, Nox is the AOPA. And now we have Origin getting into the game with bikes, and it's the Origin X1. Just going to show it on the screen here for those of you that haven't seen it, obviously. It's got the Origin touch, the sleekness, and now you were talking...
The extra price.
The extra price. The show-offiness. It's like a Rolex, right? Now, how does this differentiate from the Nox or the Drake? I mean, the Dragonfly seems to be your run-of-the-mill, like, originally it's like construction yellow, right? It looks like it's designed like the vehicle in Firefly, that little four-wheeler that they have. I can't remember what they called it, but it's like it's just a cargo hauler for all intents and purposes, a limited range cargo hauler. And then you have the Nox, which is like all about speed. It seems like it's built for racing or race fighting. Where does this fit in?
So this is a really interesting little beast. So it's not one hull, to be clear. We have three hulls that are all considered the X1. A base model, a racer model, and something that's being called, depending on who you talk to, either a combat or an exploration model. I'll get back to that one. So the first question that we're running into is, first and foremost, if all of these things are either some sort of utility vehicles or racers generally, what is the base model and what is the racer? Looks like the racer is a lighter base model with no guns possible. So it is literally an unarmed racer, meaning the base model is an ineffective racer with one gun.
Yeah, and there's no room for cargo on this thing.
Zero cargo. And there's actually, looking at it, to me, a question of what suits will fit in it. Is this something you'll be able to get into with heavy armor? Dragonfly, I don't think there's any question. This thing?
Yeah, because you're just sitting on top. This has that whole canopy thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, so both of these are shielded, obviously. When you move on to the X1 Force Edition, that thing has an extra shield generator in the back. Now, there was a comment by one of the devs, take this as you will, that it would be a good explorer option. That gives me a pile of questions about what that means. Is it a good explorer option because it has a little more power, like power generation?
Maybe because it has room for specialty scanners?
That's another question there. Does it have additional juice to power a scanner? Is it simply a better explorer because it has a second shield generator and that shield generator can be specialized to prevent radiation or something? If so, holy crap, that's a huge bit of news because it means things like the Dragonfly will have problems. Or is it simply being called a better explorer, and by explorer they mean scout? Because in that case, yeah, we have an obvious thing here. If it's a scout, then having the extra shield generator and the bigger gun, yeah, that looks like a much better scout ship. It's an interesting situation, actually. Three hulls, one of them super specialized, one of them very generalized but with no cargo at all, and a third one that's the same as the first one but more survivable somehow.
Yeah.
I'm not currently seeing a reason to have the first one over the third one, other than them saying that they want a slightly gimpier version to exist.
I mean, in the concept of the game world, having a cheap, fast, single-person ship to get from point A to point B when you're on a planet seems like a great thing to have if you're like a space farmer. Like go into town and pick up groceries or something. I don't know. It's not even like, no, it should really be a pickup, right? That's what it should be for that purpose. I don't know what you use this for. It should be the four-wheeler. It seems, yeah, you're right. It seems like this is the luxury, like, transport. I just want to go for a ride. Like this is your pleasure bike for all intents and purposes.
Looking at the first model of the X1, all I can think on that thing is that it's going to be very popular around cities and populated areas as a way to get NPCs from point A to point B with some flavor. The racer, I can see it because it's a specialized racer, so be it. The third one with the extra shield generator, that's starting to move into the combat zone for me. That's saying, okay, now we have another ship that can actually go out there and maybe survive against a Dragonfly that has two guns and a person sitting in the back seat with a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
Or a rail gun. I guess it's a rail gun.
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what these will get. I mean, we might even find emergent behavior like on these things over the course of the game. So it's all speculation at this point. But it's cool to see there's at least one more in that vein. I don't think we need another one after this in that particular. Like I've always said, if you have too many of a given thing, you start to water down the differences between those things in that particular. Like how many shotguns can you possibly have in an FPS before they start to bleed together in terms of where you would use one over the other? Or this one has good stopping power for close range, but that one's better at long range, but this one has a faster reload, and then you run out of things to make them different. So I'm hoping we don't do that too quickly here as well.
PlanetSide 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. PlanetSide 2, when it launched, wasn't that bad, but they added gun after gun after gun after gun, and they started to be really watered down. Anyway.
And maybe this Origin X1 Original Edition really is just that. It's just a watered down, if you need a relatively inexpensive single-person ship to get from point A to point B from the back of your Freelancer, this is going to be it. But it will not carry cargo for you. It would be a way to land, go get a mission or something, maybe kill somebody if you needed to go down and shoot them with one gun, but that's about it.
All right, so I think, have you any final words on the X1 before we move on?
I think it's pretty, but some people are saying it looks like a can opener, and I find that hilarious.
A can opener? You know, I do think... I thought it kind of looked like some kind of applicator when I first, like, it's like, obviously it's too big, but if it were smaller, like I would use it to like squirt super glue onto something, right? Like
the exact term
Buggums
here used is a bottle opener.
A bottle opener? Yep, I could see that.
Yep.
It does look like that. Okay. So... Anyway, let's hop to the end of the show, which we call Life in the Verse. We just kind of talk about things not Star Citizen related. Once Star Citizen actually comes out, I mean, when 3.0 gets into our hands, we'll probably spend this time talking about, things that happen to us in 3.0. So, or in the game. That's the idea behind it anyway. So, what have you been playing or doing recently while you've been waiting for 3.0?
So, I'm going to start with one thing, and then I'm going to move into the thing I'm going to talk too much about. The thing I want to start with is this. This is a Galaxy Note 8, and I love it. I got a DeX unit for this thing. So effectively what this thing can do is if you plug it into a keyboard and mouse, and then a monitor, it becomes a laptop. So for the first time in many, many years, I have a private laptop, at least when I have a TV. So, enjoying that.
You just do a sort of screen mirroring onto the TV?
Actually, no. It's got a full OS. Full Android OS.
Oh, so it does like an HDMI out of the thing into the TV?
Yeah. It's an HDMI out of the little DeX unit, which also lets you plug in USB keyboard and mouse and other peripherals. So, I've been really happy with that. I don't know if anyone else here is an Apple fan, unfortunately, but... I really like this feature, what Google's doing with that. But the other thing, Elite Dangerous. Oh my God, Elite Dangerous. They just released patch 2.4.
Yeah.
The Arrival, I believe is what they called it, in which the Thargoids have arrived. Thargoids being some sort of weird plant, alien, organic spaceship things. Allow me to start by saying this is probably one of the most irritating rollouts I've ever seen because at patch launch, the community goal to have anything to be able to scan or attack the Thargoids was not complete. Scheduled to not be complete, I would add. So for the first couple of days...
scheduled to be incomplete? Huh?
That's correct. It wouldn't complete until Thursday, and I think the patch released on Monday, or something like that. So, it was Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. Anyway, so there was a gap where there was no way to scan the alien ships, so you couldn't get any data about them. You could just see them. And you couldn't shoot them. They just out-regened all of your damage or took none at all. And they were hostile. So if you got interdicted and pulled out of Super Cruise, or whatever, they're not Super Cruise, Hyper Cruise or whatever it is, you might just die. And this happened to multiple explorers. They were just flying around minding their own business in unarmed small ships and just got blown up. And there was no counter. They just died. And if you tried to fight the Thargoids, you had no way to damage them. So you drop into an optional space, this inhuman signal source, or whatever the hell they called it, and then the Thargoids would just kill you. They would just blow you up. Unless maybe you dropped off a present for them, and then it didn't do anything. So a couple days later, they released the weapons and everything else, or a weapon and a scanner, so you could actually raid boss style kill these things. And of course, within hours of this going live, people have killed one. And
Hmm.
by the way, I'd like to add the person who first got a Thargoid kill, Commander Harry Potter,
Of
the same
course.
man who
I
destroyed your
recognize that
community
name.
event. That's right. This
His
amazing
legend
troll of a
lives on.
man lives on. Um, and actually, within a day, people were solo killing these raid boss style ships by flying backwards and kiting them. Let
Yeah.
that sink in. Yeah. So, with nothing to really kill them, they were already reverse key killing these things. So, okay, you think this is bad enough for a major patch, right? Part of what they wanted to do was improve quality of life in the game. And the first thing that they did was try to improve mission rewards. And they wanted to do that by encouraging people to take missions that went from one location to a location that was far away, rather than just taking missions that were easy one hops. So, as a great example for this, you could take a passenger and pick them up at a station and fly them to the station next door. And you might accept this mission if the station you were flying them to was only maybe a couple of thousand light seconds from the star, because then it's only going to take you a few minutes, you collect your reward, and you're done, right?
Hmm.
They wanted to encourage you to fly tens of thousands of light seconds, and they'd make those passengers pay so that they could go further, and it'd be a good, reasonable reward for a new player to take this mission to fly for 15 straight minutes in a straight line with no content. This is really what they wanted you to do. They wanted to incentivize you to walk AFK while your ship flew in a straight line toward the station for 15 minutes with no chance of anything happening to you.
15 minutes. I
Oh,
don't think
that's a
there's
small
even
one.
enough like fuel in these ships based on what I've played.
Oh, there's
Would you have
plenty
to
of fuel.
refuel?
No, 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 no. You can fly in Super Cruise for a very long time. In fact, Hutton Orbital
I
is one
guess
of
it's
the
just the
places they
jumps that
tried to.
drain it the most.
It's really the jumps. There's like a tons per hour stat, but it's a very low number. So Hutton Orbital is one of these stations. Those of you who heard about Elite Dangerous here have probably heard of Hutton. It's 0.22 light years from the star to this station,
Damn.
representing at least an hour and a half of flight time in a straight line,
At the
doing nothing.
fastest speed you can
At the
possibly achieve.
fastest speed you can possibly achieve in the game.
Which is
They
basically, I
want
think,
to
like
incentivize you to go to these
.9.
places. Yeah. So this already sounds kind of terrible, right?
Yeah.
But the way they wanted to do it was increasing the payouts. And somebody misplaced some decimal points.
Yeah. I saw some screenshots so far that let me see if I can
Yes.
find the one that you
Yeah, I
sent me.
linked a couple of these to you. These
I
actually
did not see
led to
this one
mission
before.
rewards. Yeah, here we go. There's what happened. Mission rewards to the tune of up to 2 quintillion credits. That is a million trillion credits.
Trillion. Oh my god.
A million trillion credits. Let
You
that
do this
sink
one
in.
mission, you're set for life. You won the game.
The
It's
most
game over.
expensive ship in the game you can buy and equip will cost you less than a billion credits total.
So this is like 100, 200 times that? No,
You could
more than
buy
that. It's
you
like a
could
million
buy
times that.
millions
Yeah.
of the most expensive ship in the game, outfitted as well as you can possibly outfit them
Yeah, you
in one mission.
how does that get past QA?
That's a very good question. That's
Did they QA
that's an
it?
amazing question. This was in beta with players playing
That's
these
right.
builds
It's been
for
like a
more than a
month.
month.
Yeah. What the hell?
This is the single worst QA I have ever seen in a game.
And then
It's
how long, of course, did it take them to disable the missions and or fix it?
a day to disable. And the way that they disabled, this gets better. They can't fix it yet. They haven't figured it out.
They haven't figured out the problem.
So instead of disabling it, they said, well, we're going to have a hard cap. And the hard cap is 30 million credits per mission, which is still an absurd amount of money
yeah.
for one mission. And you can stack them.
And you're getting like millions and millions of credits anyway. Like all these missions seem to be
is your
super
maximum.
high.
If you accept anything that's over 30 million credits, our client will disconnect you before it can accept the mission.
Wait. In addition to the hard cap, they're kicking you off the game when you try to accept one of these absurd missions?
That's the hard cap. The absurd missions are still there. But if you click one, it disconnects you.
Does it give you a message saying temporary bug, please don't click these missions?
It doesn't.
No,
it
just makes their game look buggy and shitty. Okay, that's one way to fix it.
So, with this in mind, people found systems that have a station that's relatively far away, but not that far away.
Like 10 minutes instead of an hour.
Or like 5 minutes.
Okay.
So the mission rewards won't go up into the quintillions. That won't happen, you're okay. But they'll sure as hell stay just under that 30 million cap, and there will be dozens of them.
Yes. Yes, there will. I have said before, and this reinforces... So basically, I didn't pick up Elite until about a month ago when I got the Oculus. And from listening to your stories about Elite and other stories about Elite, the conclusion I came to was that Star Citizen is being made by people who absolutely are passionate about games and space games in particular. Elite is made by people who do not play games. Like, this is just their day job. Yeah. They go into work, they code for this thing, and then they leave, and they don't care about it. There's no effort there. If somebody calls up the guy in charge and says, there's an awful bug, we have to do something, he's probably like, we'll just take care of it on Monday, whatever. It's not a big deal. Yeah. What do you mean it's not a big deal? There are people playing right now. They're outraged. Let them be outraged. It's not going to affect anything. Who cares? Right? That's what I envision going on inside this studio because of what happens here. Like, oh, QA wants to take a vacation right before the big thing? Yeah, whatever. Let them go to France or what. Or they're in France, aren't they?
Yeah. England. They're in England.
England, okay.
So there, I just linked you an image. There's a guy who did this amazing post. I'm trying desperately to find him here real quick on the Elite Dangerous subreddit because I want to call this dude out. His name is Why So Delirious.
Okay.
And he made this incredible profane post that pointed people at a system called Rhea, which I would also like to note is near Earth, so it's very central. I linked you the image another time as well. It's near Earth, very central, and it is also the capital of one of the power play factions. So there's a lot of people here normally. Not thousands of people. There are dozens of people here on a daily basis normally.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 24 hours, there have been over 42,000 people and growing. I believe I've seen screenshots well over 50,000 now.
And this is just because this guy posted, hey, there's a ton of money to be made right here?
This guy made an incredible post giving you the exact station to go to. He told you what ship you should buy. He gave you a build. He gave another build for the Type 7 transporter. You see some of those there as well. And said, take passengers and go from point A to point B, and you could make 400 million credits an hour in a way that Frontier has declared legit. 400 million an hour.
Hard to see why this has mixed reviews on Steam.
To let this sink in, an Anaconda, the largest ship you can buy, or okay, not the largest, the best ship you can buy in the large size without reputation with one of the minor factions, or major factions, costs about 150 million credits. Now, let me make perfectly sure of that before you outfit it.
150?
Before you outfit this ship without any sort of discounts, it's 146,969,450 credits. So in 2 runs of this guy's path, you can buy an Anaconda, outfit it to do more passengers, and then continue to do the runs to make slightly more money.
And I mean, that's the whole goal in these, right? Is usually just to make your way up. Oh, I want to try the bigger
To
ships. I want to do
you
this.
That's exactly it. People want to get to an anaconda. Generally, that's like the new player goal
It's
is to be
like
like, I want to
end
get into an
game
anaconda.
in traditional MMOs is
To be fair,
represented by that.
there are people who have played 600 plus hours in this game
Hmm.
without getting an anaconda. It is not an easy or fast thing. All of a sudden, we're talking about a game where you could play for years casually and never get close to an anaconda. And if you spend an afternoon in a crappy transport ship, you'll have an A-rated, perfectly outfitted anaconda that all you need to do is engineer, and you'll have so many rebuys you can ram it into people for days and not have to care.
That's great. I built the most expensive ship in the game as a kamikaze boat.
You know what?
Because I
You could
can.
do it if you wanted to.
I like it.
You could outfit the entire thing with plasma accelerators, with extra heat, and bake yourself shooting at somebody for an hour until your ship literally melts, and no one will have to care. The whole game's economy is gone in one patch.
Mm-hmm.
You notice there's 50,000 plus people
Oh yeah.
who have been through that system now. This is no longer a small thing.
Are they gonna buy the next expansion? What are they gonna do in it? They gonna just?
I'm not.
I don't know.
Quite sure what Frontier can do now. Yeah, I've got another screenshot here. 53,000 from a couple hours later. Money is no longer an issue. And when money isn't an issue, you can literally buy your way to the reputation you need with the minor factions.
Mm-hmm.
There's donation missions for credits.
Ah, that's right. I remember seeing those. Okay.
And if you have 1 billion credits, spend 300 million credits to get yourself, up to king rank with the Empire and buy yourself a cutter. Nobody cares.
No. So it's a very interesting time because, as you mentioned, there's all these problems with Elite Dangerous. But I will say it is one of the really cool experiences you can have with a VR headset. Because I have not tried Valkyrie, but I've done a lot of reading on like comparisons of people who have played both Valkyrie and Eve Valkyrie, by the way, for those of you not paying attention to space games with Oculus support. And most people say that Elite is a better experience. And partly because they went for, in a sense, a very immersive feel, similar to what Star Citizen is doing, but obviously not quite to the same extent, where everything occurs in-game, right? Your ship, you look to the left and you pull up a window on your ship to negotiate to do comms or something. Like, it's all built into the experience of flying around, and you have to contact somebody and ask for landing, and they tell you which place to land to. So there's all kind of immersive stuff built into that. And so when you're flying around in the ship in Elite with the Oculus, it feels really cool. And the sound effects are great too. The thum 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 thum, like when you speed up and slow down, and it feels so awesome to do that with the VR headset on. It really nails the feeling. All the systems built into the game seem to be the things that have the biggest problems. This one is probably just the latest in a line. Like, there's, it's always been criticized, especially when it came out, as being like this massive, shallow pool. Like, okay, what are you going to do? Fight for a little bit, and then do that again, and then maybe mine a thing, and then mine again. Like, it's all the same. And they've done it. They've made some new things, but it's still the same things over and over and over again, like a traditional MMO. If you're okay with that, then you're okay with that. I know a lot of people like to zen out while doing these kind of things in either EVE Online or in Elite. And if you're doing it in a crazy immersive environment, that can make it totally worthwhile. And I'm totally there. However, point of order, the 970 that I have is just not quite strong enough for Elite. because if I
Oh.
play it at a resolution and quality level high enough to like read all the text in fairly crisply,
As you'd want
as
to.
you'd want to, because there's a lot of text on your screen when you're looking at menus and things, when you're going through your ship and you're turning this on, turning that off, switching this or whatever, trying to read the readout of their target that says how much armor they have or whatever. You want those lines to all look nice and crisp. It really pulls you out of that immersive experience if everything is just blurry, which it is on the lowest settings. And that's where I have to have it to get 90 frames. I've cranked it up and it looks really nice and crisp, but then I'm down to 45 frames and I get motion sickness fairly quickly at 45 frames, which a lot of people do with the headsets because they just don't track well enough. So that's my problem. I'm planning to upgrade to a 1070 or 1080 sometime in the near future to deal with that. And then I
With the
might jump back
crash
in.
of the crash of the coin market, they're actually coming back down in price. So life is pretty good.
Oh, with the because people were buying them specifically for the Bitcoins and Dogecoins and things like that, Dogecoins.
There were two new cryptocurrencies that came out that were being considered as a gold rush again, and all the 1070s and 1080s were basically bought up for a couple of months by these or not Bitcoin, these whatever coin miners that were out there. Prices were spiked like $200 for most of the summer.
Gotcha. Okay, well that explains that. Just because you couldn't get them at MSRP, you mean?
Yep, you couldn't get them at MSRP anywhere.
Ah.
You could if you were very careful
Yeah, 'cause
and you had stock alerts up.
970s are supposed to be, I think when I got mine it was like 250 300 range. Usually the 70 series is around there and the 80s are usually around the $400 $500 range. From previous generations. So I think I looked into it and I couldn't find a 70 for less than 400. So that explains that, I guess. So I'll certainly be looking into those sometime in the near future. But the other things that I have been doing besides playing around in with the Oculus stuff, which I talked a little bit about last time, is I got a new chair because my previous chair I'd been sitting in for so long had worn down to like basically sitting on plywood. The padding was gone. And
Oh God.
trying to find a chair that you're going to live with for a while, it's not easy.
No,
There's a
it's
lot
a hard
of
choice.
yeah, and there's like a lot of cheap chairs that will just sort of fall apart on you, or the padding will just be gone in less than a year, and you'll be sitting on plywood again. Or it's just like not as comfortable, doesn't have as much the things that you want, and it's not like you can just go to a store. There's no chair store, unless you want to go to a very expensive version of that that sells like
We have a
office
store
furniture.
here in Seattle called Couch.
Oh, we don't have that here. We have, you know what? This is the same thing I think I told the story of when I went search shopping for a couch, and all of the stores we went to just had these wonderful looking couches that were just obnoxious to sit in. They weren't comfortable. I'm like, I'm putting this in a home theater. I want this to be like reclining seats. And there were like two of them in the whole store. Everything else was just like, oh, but it looks so nice. Like, I don't fucking care. I'm going to be sitting in it. I don't want to be sitting in a chair that's uncomfortable. You moron. Why have they... Never mind. Anyway, so new chair. And I went back and forth, and I was looking at a brand called Ariens, which is like the gold standard for like office furniture. Like what is the term for ergonomic chair or whatever. I'll see if I can find. Damn it, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, I searched for a couple times. I found one on Craigslist. It was at a store nearby, so I went to try and sit in it. And, it was comfy. It's like a mesh seat. And it was still like it was too small. Like I felt like they didn't have a bigger one. Like they have different sizes. But I wound up getting a Need for Seat from Maxnomic. It's like
Maxnomic.
You've probably seen like
two.
The racer chairs. Like these are the chairs that are marketed towards gamers. And my friend Mark is actually flies planes, and a lot of these chairs are supposed to be designed after like racing car like sculpted like seats, like with a bucket seat type thing. And a lot of them have like holes cut here. And I never knew what the point of that was, but I was showing it to it was my friend Brian, and he's into cars, and he's like, oh, those are where you like have the actual seat belts in race cars come down and lock in to come over the
Yep.
shoulder. And like,
Because it has to
why?
be the correct angle so you don't. Yep.
Yeah, why do you keep that design function on an office chair marketed at gamers? I guess because it looks cool. But anyway, I'm fairly happy with it. The only issue I have is kind of weird. Like, instead of being like, I mean, the back can do this, whatever. It feels like the cushion is kind of going up a little bit at the front. So if I
Probably
put
is.
it, if I put the chair low enough so that my feet are comfortable because they're not like all the pressure right behind my knees, then I'm too low to the ground. But if I put the chair high enough, but I figured out the solution. This is the like most convoluted thing. I bought a $400 chair and I'm like, it doesn't work. The chair doesn't work. So I bought one of those little footrests. So now I can have my feet elevated and the chair's at the right height. I'm golden. And this is probably the most boring story I've ever told on this show. I don't know why it's important. But I haven't been doing much of interest recently, Gray. Not much.
Got a chair.
I do got a chair. I've been playing League of Legends again, actually. For what it's worth. I don't know how much you've been
Beating
keeping...
Tencent.
Yeah. I don't know how much you've been keeping track, but in November, during the next preseason, they are getting rid of the old rune system completely and replacing it with a combined runes mastery system. So all of the runes that you bought will be essentially repaid to you in IP or RP, I guess. If you bought the rune pages with RP, you'll get a bunch of that back as a refund. All future, like this whole new system, there's no cost to get it. So it'll be easier for new people to get in. Not that there's any people that haven't tried League of Legends at some point, but it'll be easier to get in and get back in because you don't have to worry about buying the right rune set and saving up to be able to be competitive. You'll just have access to everything from the get-go, which is great.
Do you have any idea how much IP and RP that's going to refund to me? I haven't played in years.
Well, you could buy every Star Guardian skin. There's a new Kog'Maw skin where he's a pug. It's a Pugmaw. It's great. I like it more than the default Kog'Maw. I love it. The default Kog'Maw
is where it's at, man.
Is disgusting looking. I like the one that has the what is it, the Chinese New Year Kog'Maw with all the fireworks. I like that one.
I had every skin up until the pug, and then I was like, no.
You're not gonna do that. I like the pug. All right. Anyway, my point is,
anglerfish is where it's at, man.
Oh yeah, and you know what? The anglerfish is kind of cool. The new system seems like it's going to be very interesting, and I'll be able to get in on the ground floor with everybody else while everybody's like, I don't know what we're doing. Let's figure it out now. There's no meta. Throw out the meta. It's gone. Everything's coming fresh new. So we get to and normally. If I'm diving back into League of Legends after a long absence, I'm like, well, better look up every guide for every character I play and redo all my itemization. But now I get to be one of the people figuring it out for the first time, so that's cool. Although I'll be behind all the people playing on the test server, so there's that. But yeah, November's when that's happening. I'm kind of getting back to the 6 of my champions have been reworked since the last time, and I'm exaggerating, but a lot of them have been reworked since I last played. So I have to get used to all the new things that are happening. There's Cho'Gath, Misfortune, Veigar, and Brand have all been reworked to some degree or another since I have last played. So
I wonder if they're seeing player fall off.
I don't know.
That's an interesting move to make.
The rune system, I think, has been in their wheelhouse to get rid of that and replace that for a long time. It's just, when do you do that? A year ago they rolled out the new client. That's what they were working on for the longest time. And I really like the new client. Now it finally has item sets built into it too. I think it's finally got everything that the previous client had. And the new pick 2 roles and jump into a queue is much better than jumping into a queue and arguing with people over who's going to play what role. Oh, well, I can't play top.
How's that again?
I don't miss those days. Like, there like of like 10 or 12 games that I've played recently, there's been one game where somebody got shunted into support and didn't want it, and they were like, guys, I'll play support, but I really don't know what I'm doing. I'd love to trade with somebody. And so I was like, yeah, I'll trade. What do you want top? And he's like, oh, give me Riven. I was like, no problem, give me Leona. Boom, 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 done, let's play. Like, there wasn't as much drama anymore. And the new honor system that they put in there, they've basically created a ranking system in honor where you can level up your honor scale, and you get more like loot rewards to craft skins or whatever if your honor is higher. And every game at the very end, as soon as it shuts down, it says, hey, do you want to honor one of your 4 teammates? And then you can honor them for one of 3 things. And which thing you honor them for doesn't matter, but one of them is tilt proof, stayed cool. So like all you have to do to get honor is be like, guys, we can do this, don't worry. And somebody's going to be like, that guy was tilt proof. And so I think it actually is legitimately working in general.
That's good.
Occasionally I still have to tell people, listen, stop typing anything into the text chat that won't help us win. And then when they type some stupid shit like, goddamn support never helps me, oh my god, you miss every hook, I'm like, that's not helping us win. Please don't do that. I like try to put it in the most obvious context ever. Like, before you go to type something, think about how that will help us win. If you're warning me that something's happening, or you're saying, let's meet up at Baron, those are attempts to help us win. Those are legitimate things. 2 thumbs up. But if all you're doing is complaining, that's not helping us win. That's helping you defend your ego.
You're a dick.
Well, it's not even that. It's just that your self-confidence is so shot that you have to point out to, guys, it's not my fault. Just so you know, it's their fault. Like, that's all that is. That's just people, trying to defend themselves because they can't take anybody being mad at them personally, or they don't want anybody else to think that it's their fault, so they have to rag on some. Anyway, not important. Psychology, whatever. But point is, only type in text chat if it'll help us win. Okay, thanks. That's all I got.
Yep, no, that's fair. That's fair.
And that's all I have to say about that. All right. So thanks, guys, for watching. I'm out. We'll be back for real this time on the last Sunday of the month, 10/29, unless something horrible happens, like they release 3.0 to the public test server a day beforehand, or they're going to release it the day after. And
I'll still talk about it.
We might decide to postpone the show under those kind of circumstances. But in general, come check us back out, 10/29. See you later.